sure the cameras are on, Dan.
That's it. They're on, ready to roll.
Appreciate it, dude. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
I was looking forward to this one.
I've been looking forward to it, too.
Glad you accepted.
I'm glad I did, too. Thanks for the invitation.
The 2 Cent Tour. Give the audience the 2 Cent Tour of Dr. Dan.
Yeah, no problem at all. Yeah, so I'm Dan O'Rourke. I grew up in Monongahela, Pennsylvania, and I guess my childhood can really be described through athletics. You know, I was always into a lot of different sports, and actually, funny story, I ran into one of my Little League baseball coaches last week, and I've been seeing him in probably 25 years, and he was telling me a story about how he ran into somebody recently, and he was talking to the guy about competitive athletes that he's been around and competitive athletes that he's coached, and he brought up my name and said I'm probably the most competitive person he's ever been around. And he told a story about how one time we were about 9 years old, and he had a friend who he invited over to play a baseball game, just a kind of a friendly scrimmage game. And we were going through the line at the end of the game, and the guy said to him, you know, you got a really good baseball team. And he's like, yeah, we did all right. We're okay. And the guy's like, yeah, we're not even sure what the score was. And he said, I was standing right behind the coach, and I told him, well, it was 21-0, and you guys scored 0 runs and had 0 hits too. So I've always just rubbed it in a little bit, and at the time I don't think I was trying to do that, but it's kind of what ended up. But I did it. But I would
have done it too.
And he said that I would know the score of every single game, and I was always under the kind of the impression, and I wanted to win, and I was willing to do anything to win. And I remember I hated losing.
Why I like you.
I actually hated losing more than I liked winning. I just couldn't stand it. And I was that way kind of my whole life. And, you know, in the end, baseball really kind of won out. And when I got to high school, that's the sport that I kind of started to separate myself in, and started to get some Division I looks, and started to get actually some professional looks in high school as well. I actually had an offer from, at the time, they were the Florida Marlins. Now they're the Miami Marlins. Oh, yeah. Coming out of high school, and
right on.
I ended up going to Ohio University and had a baseball scholarship there.
My daughter's there right now.
Oh, Bobcats, fantastic. Right? Bobcats, yeah. Beautiful campus.
Hi, Glenn.
How you doing? I hope you're enjoying your time there.
Athens, Ohio.
That's exactly right.
That's
you know, it's a great place. And it's funny because I was going on recruiting trips, and I went there, and I've never been there before, and just kind of fell in love with the campus and the facilities, and ended up going there and had a pretty successful career. Had a few more kind of some professional interests, but things kind of fell through. I had an injury my senior year that kind of put me behind a little bit. Then I kind of carried on my career as an educator and as a coach, and then it actually ended up leading to school administration. But I think that when you're done competing at such a high level, you still want to find a way to compete. Mm-hmm. And then it kind of transitioned to me competing against myself. You know, I was no longer competing against all the other Division I athletes, all the other teams. I wanted to compete against myself and push myself and see how much I can grow and see how far I can go. So that's kind of the start of my transition to personal growth, personal development, on top of a few other stories that I'm sure we're going to get into momentarily.
Oh, for sure. So let me ask you this. We'll go right into it. What is, would you say, if not the most important, but what was one of the most important lessons you've learned out of athletics that you've taken into your adult years?
I would say without a doubt, the first thing that comes to my mind is discipline.
Okay.
I think because, you know, a lot of times people talk about motivation and then they talk about discipline. And I think motivation is important, but I think it's nowhere nearly as important as discipline is. Because, for example, there's been plenty of times where I haven't been motivated to go to the gym, or I haven't been motivated to get into a freezing cold tub of ice to do a cold water submersion. But I've been disciplined to do it.
Guys.
I am one of those guys. I'm full-fledged on the bus. I'm on the train. But I've been disciplined to do it because I know at the end of the day it's what's best for me.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I tell myself. Like, yeah, you're not motivated right now to go to the gym. It's 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. or 7 p.m. But I know how good I'm going to feel afterwards, and I know in the long run that's what's best for me. So I'm disciplined to do it. And I think a lot of that discipline was born out of playing high-level athletics.
Oh, right on. So, yeah, it's like discipline probably is at the top of the pyramid. I mean, motivation is probably the most abused word. At least in the social media era. You know, what happens when you motivate an idiot? Well, you have a motivated idiot. Yeah, you only go so far. You have to have the aptitude and the want and the desire.
That's right.
And daily discipline.
That's right. And I love motivation. I love motivational speeches. I love the locker room speeches and all those kind of things. But I agree with you. And I think that only goes so far. It only goes so far, and I think it rubs off quickly too. But if you're someone who's disciplined and stays focused on the task at hand and the goals that you set, then you can achieve a lot more than most people can.
Let me ask you a question about competition, because when I was joking earlier that I love to win. Well, yeah, when I get into a team environment, and I still do that once in a while, competitive team sport, I still have that desire to go. The one thing I have shed from my life as I got older, though, is the element of competition in business. I just, I really am not interested in being in competition with anybody else, but I'm probably in terrible competition with myself and my prior acts. I'm always looking at being the only person I'm competing against is myself. How much do you think of that goes on today, or do you think people are lost in the competition of those around them, often unnecessarily?
That's a great question. I think it varies depending on the person, but I'll tell you, for me personally, what changed it was perception, because I think that growing up and being as competitive as I was, I think it is something that put me on a trajectory for success and to be able to separate myself athletically and academically, because I always had the mindset that, I have these God-given abilities, I have these talents that I was blessed with, but I also don't want to have any regrets. And I want to put everything on the table to try to do as much as I possibly can to maximize those things for me and also for my team. But I think when I had kids, that thing kind of changed a little bit. And I think that my competitiveness kind of changed in a different way, where I wanted to, instead of competing, like you said, on a team, it's me competing because I want to be the best version of me for those that I love, those that I serve, those that I lead. Sure. And I want to have an impact on them and also the other people that are around me. So you're right in terms of my competitiveness changed, where now if I were to go play a pickup basketball game, I'm probably not going to go home and be angry for 2 or 3 hours if I would lose like I used to be if I was playing a college baseball game. But now it's more of, I want to compete against myself to be the best version of myself and continuously grow, and knowing that there's never an end to that. And that's okay with me because I can just continue to push myself to improve myself.
Yeah. And don't you think it's so important to kids to understand that, or to try to convey that? But it's so hard when they're young. It's just hard. It's almost like I can speak for myself. The years have made me truly understand the value of competing against myself. In my own metrics, in terms of achievement. But oftentimes, when I tell people I'm not competitive about, my real estate or, the internet business I ran or whatever, I wasn't really interested in what my competitors were doing. That falls on deaf ears today. I
think it does. And I think that even kids on a playground, like they might be playing Foursquare or some other game, and you have to kind of tell them, like, look, this isn't the World Series. Like, yeah, you're competing, but you're out there to have fun. I think it's if you can encourage people to channel that competitiveness in the right way, then they can make a huge difference. But I think it's very difficult in younger kids to actually be able to convey that message to them in a positive and proactive manner.
And sometimes the competition is nuts. It's really based upon comparison of strangers.
That's right. Even take, for example, like travel baseball or AAU baseball. And it seems like nowadays almost everybody's in that. Yeah. And they're saying, well, if Johnny over here in this class is going to AAU baseball and you're not, that's going to put you behind and you're not going to succeed. And when the reality is like, look, I was never on like an AAU baseball team. I was never on like a real travel team. Those things didn't exist as much when I was in high school. And we still turned out okay. And I played baseball with guys that were first round draft picks that didn't do that either.
Right. Yeah. It's just interesting. I think that we, especially the term entrepreneur gets thrown around a lot, right? And I think when folks see the entrepreneurial journey as it is being portrayed on Instagram or other socials, it's really about comparison. It's really just in many instances, a big tease. And then, it's almost like and maybe I'm confusing comparison and competition, but I think they are intermixed in some degree.
Agree. And I think you hit on a good point. It's like when especially on social media, because people go on social media and they scroll through it and they'll see pictures of somebody that are photoshopped, or they'll see pictures of somebody on vacation, or the best of the best that they have.
Yeah.
And I tell people, don't compare yourself to them. Your only competition is yourself. You look in the mirror, and at the end of the day, if you can say that I put in full effort to make myself better, that's what really counts, because you don't know what they have. You don't know if that's a real picture. You don't know how much money they have, or what trainers they have, or how much money they put into somebody that's editing that picture. The only thing you need to worry about is yourself. And if you can go to bed at night knowing that you put the best effort in to make yourself better, that's what really counts. And that's what's going to make you happy, because you're not going to be happy comparing yourself to other people on social media. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, but I also, I believe too, and maybe life has taught me this, I think it's easier. It seems to be easier to understand happiness a little better the older you are.
Agree.
You know?
I 100% agree. I can tell you that there's ways that I've learned to make myself happier as I've gotten older, because when I was younger, I feel like it was a rat race and constant competition and constant trying to improve myself, almost like selfishly, because I wanted to be the best baseball player I could possibly be. I wanted to get drafted. I wanted to make a lot of money. I wanted to become famous. But now, and again, I think that perception part of it was you can sit back and kind of enjoy the smaller things in life. Like every morning I do a gratitude practice and I just try to think of 3 or 4 things that I'm grateful for. And that's one of the very first things that I do. It's because before I was waking up and I was looking at my phone and checking emails and looking at stressful text messages. But now that sets you up for pretty much an unsuccessful day. But if you can flip that script and figure out things that you're grateful for and happy about, then I think you can set yourself up
start your day with that.
You can start your day off right. Yeah.
What when you came out of college and the baseball dream, let's say a year or 2 or 3 after college, it pretty much ended?
Yes.
Okay, so now what for you? Well, wind us back a little bit.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So, you know, out of high school, I had an offer from the Marlins, and it wasn't high in what they offered in terms of before the draft at a pre-draft tryout, where their national scouting director flew in and he watched me pitch like 3 simulated innings.
Okay.
And he said he was going to call me a few days before the draft. So he called me a few days before the draft. And at the time I was talking to an advisor. You can't sign with an agent because then you lose your eligibility. And the advisor said, well, tell him that you're not going to sign unless you go in the top 10 rounds. Okay. Because if you don't go in the top 10 rounds, if you go in rounds 15, back then there was 50 rounds, then if you don't do well a year or 2, then they're more likely to release you, and then you don't have college eligibility left.
Yeah, it's muddled.
It's gone. So when I went into college, I had a pretty good freshman year, a good sophomore year, I had a really, really good junior year. I thought I was going to get drafted that year, and I didn't. I went into my senior year, and I met with pretty much almost half the MLB teams. I met with the MLB Scouting Bureau. I thought I was going to get drafted, not super high, but back then I was thinking maybe around 20, 25 out of 50. And then about 6 weeks left in the season, my shoulder, I just had terrible shoulder tendonitis, and I wasn't as effective. My velocity dropped. My off-speed pitches weren't as good. I wasn't as effective as I was otherwise. And at the end of the season, you know, I still had some calls and some offers from some independent teams. But at that point, I was ready to move on. I saw a lot of guys that I played with that did get drafted and what the life was like in minor league baseball. And it's not what it's all cracked up to be. It's actually, it's a tough life. It really is. And at that time, I knew that I was good enough to play minor league baseball, but I also, at that point, came to the realization that I wasn't good enough to make it to the majors, even if I would have pushed hard and worked hard, because I saw what it takes. And I wasn't a guy throwing in the high 90s. I was a low 90s type of guy at max. So
You're a finesse pitcher.
Oh, was it what?
You're a finesse pitcher?
I was. I mean, but back then, you know, throwing in the low 90s is still pretty hard.
Oh, yeah.
But in minor league baseball and major league baseball, no. But it's not hard enough to set yourself apart. Yeah. So, you know, I got out of college, and then I was like, you know what? My last year actually was a coach. I was finishing up some education work, and my coach asked me to stick around. Unfortunately, my pitching coach that I had was there for a long time. He passed away kind of quickly, so he knew that I was still around, and I was fortunate to be like kind of an assistant pitching coach. I was an undergraduate assistant, but I served more like an assistant pitching coach for a year, which was a great experience for me. Then I got out of college, and then I got more into exercise and weightlifting. So when I knew my baseball career was over, I still wanted to compete. I still wanted to exercise. I still wanted to work out. And I continued to implement a lot of the things that my strength trainers in college incorporated for us. And that was kind of my focus at that time, was to try to succeed professionally, but then also personally, I was into weightlifting at that time.
Sure. So academically, I guess when the dream stopped of baseball, like career-wise, what did you initially want to do? Yeah,
so at that point, I was a teacher. So right after college was over, I got into teaching. So I actually taught at the high school that I went to and was the head baseball coach. And I think at the time, I might have been 23, 24 years old. I was probably one of the youngest head baseball coaches in the history of the state at that age. So I was only there for a little over a year, and then I got hired in another school district to be a teacher as well. So I went there and I was a teacher, and I coached some high school baseball, and I coached some middle school football as well. Right and then after that, I continued that kind of the trajectory, and I got my principal certification, and then I became a school administrator, then kept going on, and ended up earning my doctorate degree in 2021.
Okay, so choosing the education field, was that just something you did while you were at college, or was it something you wanted to do from a younger age?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I always used to tell myself I had some people that impacted me growing up, and a lot of times those people were coaches or some teachers. And when I got to college, earlier on, I decided that, you know what, if this baseball thing doesn't work out, I want to be in a profession where I can help people and have an impact on people and coach people and help people. And I thought that, education was the best route to go about that, because you have the unique ability to change people's lives, and it doesn't happen like that in most professions. And that kind of is what pushed me into that profession.
Yeah, for sure. What's the toughest thing about coaching kids?
That's a very, very difficult question. And I think that, to be honest with you, I think it's different now than it was before, because now I think it's that there's so much, and we use the word competition, there's so much competition from so many different people. Because let's take baseball as an example. If you're coaching them, they also might be on an AAU team, on a travel team. Some of them have several hitting coaches and pitching coaches and nutrition coaches, depending on where you are, and trying to compete, but not in a competition sense, but just in a, I'm trying to educate you and instruct you on this type of sense. There's too many cooks in the kitchen, and it's difficult to have everybody buy in because they have so many voices in their heads telling them you should be doing X, Y, or Z. But meanwhile, I'm the head coach of this team and you should be doing X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, coaching has certainly changed through the last 20, 25 years with the proliferation of cell phones and devices being attached to our hips, and then the proliferation of social media. I mean, it's renting space in these kids' heads, which you're now competing for.
That's exactly right. And I think that if you look, even in the WPIAL, there is so much turnover constantly with head coaches. And I think there's a reason for that. You're not seeing the people that are there for several decades like you used to anymore as often. And it's because I think it's becoming a way more difficult job. Yeah,
for sure. What's the biggest benefit for, for a high school athlete today if they buy into a good program? What's the biggest benefit beyond the academics, would you say?
Yeah, I think beyond the academics, it's the life lessons.
Or the athletics.
Even beyond the academics and athletics, I think there's so many life lessons that you learn from athletics. I think it's the discipline. I think it's the motivation. I think it's the goal setting. I think it's the camaraderie. I think it's the communication, the problem solving, the leadership. There's so many different life lessons you can learn to carry on to so many different things that you do, because the reality is most of the kids that are playing high school athletics and also college athletics, like the percentage of kids in high school that go on to college is very, very small to play athletics. But then the percentage of kids in college that go on to play pros is very, very small as well. But those people go on and they can be successful based on kind of the tools that they add to their repertoire based on what they do when they're playing the sports. And I think they carry that on. A lot of times I'll hear someone say business athlete. Well, it's because they have that athlete mentality and they carry it into their business and they're able to be successful because of things that they learned.
What was the strongest attribute that you personally learned from being coached?
I would say, I think, but I didn't realize it at the time, but I think now it's the mental part of things, because I think that a lot of times people are immature at certain age levels. Like if you're 15 to 22 years old and you're playing sports, the mental side of things is so much more important than you would think. And at the time, I think that some of my coaches were trying to help me with that, and a lot of the other guys as well. And looking back on it, if I can go back and tell myself something and teach myself something, it would be to work on the mental side of things that is kind of underappreciated, but can be a huge benefit if you take it on the right way.
So much of training is self-starting, right? And it's unique when you see a young person that just gets it.
Doesn't happen as often.
You just wish there were so many more of them.
That's right. Especially when you're coaching in high school, because I had the benefit of coaching in college and also coaching in high school. And I think a lot of the people in college, they're there for a reason. Like they've had some success. They're there because they want to get better. They want to compete. They're the best of the best. They're the cream of the crop. In high school, you have some kids that are just like kind of there to be there. Yeah. And a lot of times as a coach, you want them to be better than they want themselves to be better. And you're trying to push them, but sometimes they don't have kind of the it factor to want to step up and get better like that. So that is a challenge for a coach, but it's kind of your job to try to motivate them and to instill those discipline habits and actions that they can put into place, but it doesn't always happen that way.
No, it doesn't too. And coaching, whether it's a little league team or coaching a Division I NCAA team, the element of the appropriate way to coach somebody, because there's so many different ways to get through to people, right? I mean, there's so many different ways and styles and tactics and all that, but to do it right is a tough job.
It is. I read in a book, and I'm not sure which book it was, but they said that credibility is born from two things. It's expertise and relationships. And I think the more that I grow and the older that I get, I realized how important relationships are, because you're right. When if you have 40 guys on a baseball team or 102 on a football team, whatever it might be, they all tick differently. They all have different backgrounds and experiences, and they all have different things that motivate them and push them and pull them. Yeah. But I think it's your job to build those relationships, have an understanding about them, and go about it differently. Like, you can't have a one-size-fits-all approach when you're coaching, in my opinion. I know some guys out there, some guys on the internet, they're, gung-ho, they're my way or the highway and pushing all the time, but not everyone operates the same way. If someone came in here and tried to coach both of us, we both operate differently, so they should go about it in a different way and try to get the most out of us based on what makes us tick.
Yeah, and it comes down to the want of that coach to want to reach that person.
That's right.
That's a newer way of maybe coaching than maybe the old, I think about Woody Hayes and guys like that.
What's the old leadership approach too, where there was the boss or the manager, and the managerial way just doesn't work most times for the newer people, I would say.
Yeah,
the top-down approach.
You get them by the stick. It just doesn't.
The Bobby Knights don't exist. Yeah, it exists too much anymore.
No, they don't. They don't. Probably for good reason.
Yeah.
What got you interested in peak performance and helping others understand what it takes to get their own peak performance? Where did that interest come from?
Yeah, so I would say, it was really a crazy story, but I've always personally been into peak performance, like pushing myself. And I remember even in college, I used to think to myself, they're giving me a scholarship, and I want to make sure that I have no regrets at the end of the day. I don't want to leave here in 4 years or 5 years, whatever it is, and regret the fact that I could have worked out harder. I could have pushed myself more. And I could have gotten a higher GPA. Like, I always wanted to push myself for that. But in terms of like the wellness stuff that I'm into now, and the health stuff that I'm into now, and the personal development stuff that I'm into now, it was actually a crazy story. So 2 years ago, it was July of 2021, and we're recording this right now, and it's August of 2023. So it was almost exactly 2 years ago. I was going on a beach trip with my wife and 2 kids. So my kids at the time were 7 and 5 years old. And one of my best friends lives in Virginia Beach, and we go down to visit him every summer. It's kind of like a tradition that we have now. We just came back from there about a month ago. And so we were down there, and it was one of the last days. And by the way, normally we stay with them at their house. But this particular year, 2 years ago, I just finished my doctorate degree in May. I defended my dissertation. I was happy to get that off my plate. And that's a lot of work. And it's very difficult. It's very challenging. And was going to go on this vacation to try to skip away from that a little bit. And we were supposed to stay with them, but 2 days before we went on the trip, they called us and said their entire house had the stomach bug, and it was pretty bad. So we didn't want to let our kids down, so we kind of scrambled to try to find a place to stay. We finally found the place, and we called a lady the day before, and we were able to book it, and we went down there, and we had a good trip. But towards the end of it, kind of a crazy story happened that pushed me into these things even further. So it was one of the last days we had at the beach, and we went to the beach all day one day, and we went back to our room, and we were going to go to dinner that night. But my wife had made some sandwiches earlier in the day, and we decided, we're going to snack on these for now, and then we'll go to dinner in a couple of hours. But once we ate the sandwiches, we weren't really that hungry anymore. So we decided, let's go back to the beach. It's a nice evening. We'll go there and have the kids enjoy their time, one of the last times before we go back home to Pittsburgh. So we got to the beach, and I remember when we walked up there, it was an evening. It was probably about 6:30 at night. And at that time, there's really not any lifeguards around at every block like there normally is. They're there, but it's about every 4 blocks. You can barely even see where they are, to be honest with you. So when we got to the beach, I remember looking out the water, and it just looked choppier than the other days that we were there. So I told my wife, we normally do man-to-man coverage with the kids when we're there. So she was taking my son, and I was going to stay with my daughter. She wanted to build sandcastles, and my son loves splashing in the waves, so she was going to take him out to the waves. And I said, if you take him out there, go about like 30, 40 yards to the right because it's less choppy there. So she took him out there, and I told her, I was like, stay behind that family. There's been a family out there that's been playing all week. We've seen them, probably about 5 people that are about 16 to 40 years old, I would say. Stay behind them. Are good people. If anything happens, I'm sure they'll be able to help out. So my daughter and I are building a sandcastle, and I looked out into the water, and just beyond where the waves start, we saw what we thought was a black football. And honestly, at first, I thought maybe it was a Steelers football because it was black, and all I saw was just floating out there beyond where the waves start. And I said to my daughter, her name's Gianna, I'm like, Gianna, look at that ball out there. She goes, oh, yeah, Daddy, I see it. So we keep building the sandcastle and look up there every couple of minutes, and it was still out there. And then the last time, and she stood up and was like, Dad, look, that football's still out there. And I looked out like, yeah, honey, it's out there. Then all of a sudden, that football turned over. and it was a face. And we noticed that it wasn't a football, it was a little kid that was out there in the water. So I'm starting to look around, and the lifeguards are so far away, they're obviously not seeing anything. And I'm looking at the edge of the beach to see, like, does he have a dad? Does he have an uncle or a brother or someone that's going to go out there and get him? And we didn't see anybody. Then all of a sudden I looked over and I saw a mom that was standing on the edge of where the water meets the sand, and she was screaming, and you can tell it was like the voice of a mom that you can tell that something's definitely wrong. So I thought to myself, I can't let this happen without at least trying. And I'm a strong swimmer. My parents had a pool when I was growing up, and my kids are always on my back and swimming around me when I'm with them at the pool. So I told my daughter, I'm like, honey, sit in this chair and please don't move. And, I started to sprint out there to the water to try to get him. And I remember like waving my arm to try to see if anyone can see me while I was running out there. And I ran out there and I swam. And by the time I swam out there and got him, he was in distress, like screaming at the top of his lungs. And I'm like, it's okay, buddy. I got you. I'm not going to let you go. And he grabbed onto me. And when he grabbed onto me, he grabbed onto both of my arms. And I decided I'm going to try to kick in. And when I tried to kick in, I realized that the reason we were out there is because he got pulled out in a rip current. So I was trying to kick in against a rip current and I couldn't make it. And then, imagine 5 bowling balls getting tied around your arms and trying to swim in the ocean and trying to stay above water. It's a very difficult thing to do. And I know they normally say, well, swim parallel with the beach. Well, at that time I have a little kid wrapped around me and I'm already stuck in this rip current and I really couldn't do it. So my goal at that time was just to try to stay above water, to be honest with you. And, it's funny because 3 things came to my mind at that time. The first thing is I can't believe that my wife and 2 small kids are watching me die. Like, I can't believe they have to witness what's going on right now. And it's just such a shame that they have to watch this, The second part was actually kind of funny. For some reason, I thought to myself, like, I'm so thankful that I bought extra life insurance, because if something does happen, at least I'll be taken care of. But the third thing that came to my mind was, if I make this, like, I have so much more I want to do, and I have so much more I want to give, and I have so much more of an impact that I want to have. Like, sure, I want to be there to walk my daughter down the aisle. I want to be there to see my son graduate high school, and I want to be there for them to be able to help them in all the life's trials and tribulations. Sure. But I also want to give back more. Like, if this is going to be it, like, I want people to say, like, this guy had an impact on me. He positively influenced me in some sort of capacity, and I want to step up and do more to be able to help other people out. So I said, I have to make it back to dry ground. I got to stay above water. So at one point I grabbed his one arm with my hand and I kind of pushed him off of me so I can still hold him, but I had one hand free to try to stay above water. And I continued to swim. And by that time, my wife had told those 5 people that she was playing behind that her husband was in trouble and needed help. And they came over and kind of built like a little human chain. And I was able to get the little boy in far enough to the first person where I kind of like pushed him to her, and she put her arm around his and locked him up and pulled him into the beach. And then I was close enough where I was just kind of fatigued at the time. So one of the people grabbed my arm. I was in a spot where I can touch the sand at that time. And they pulled me up. And by that time, a lot of the lifeguards were there in the white trucks and yellow lights and all the walkie-talkies. And I remember, seeing the little boy, he came out and he was throwing up everywhere. And the mom came over and she hugged me, and people were coming over to me. And I just wanted to get back to my family. So I went up to the beach chair. My daughter was crying. She thought I was going to, get sucked out. And she said that. And my son was clapping because he thought daddy was a superhero. And I sat down, and a lot of people just kept coming over to me and talking to me and thanking me and telling me stories about rip currents and drowning. And I just was sort of processing it, sort of not. And went back to the hotel that we were at. And it was just kind of a strange ending. And I remember the next day, I wanted to go back to the beach because I didn't want my kids to be afraid. I didn't want them to be nervous or scared. So we went back there, and I kind of tried to pretend like nothing happened, obviously being safe, but didn't want them to have a fear of water. But I would say, that impacted me negatively more than I thought. And I didn't really talk to a lot of people about this story for almost a year, until last summer, really. And because, I was having like flashbacks, and the beach is our happy place. Like, I love the beach, but I would see a commercial with water or a beach or whatever it was, and it was giving me flashbacks. And, we'd go to the pool, and although it was fine to go in the pool, it was still something that I was thinking of and considering the whole time we were there. So it really took a negative toll on me mentally, where I was having a really hard time getting past it. And I tried some things that weren't helping to get past it. So then I decided I kind of incidentally ran into a book called The 5 a.m. Club by Robin Sharma. And if you haven't read it before, it's a really, really good book. And it's kind of like a personal development self-help book. Okay. And I read that book, and I started to implement some of the things that it says in there in terms of personal development. And one of the things that I did was by reading that book and also starting to get into it more and following other people on social media, reading other books, listening to podcasts, watching YouTube videos, whatever it may have been, is I implement a gratitude practice where I started to talk about this before, where every morning the first few things I do is I try to think of things that I'm grateful for. And then one day, about a month into me doing this, into my head just popped up that I'm grateful that I was there that day to save that little boy and to bring him back to his mom. And that's what helped me to get over that whole situation. I tried other things. It didn't work. That helped me to get over it. And at that time, I thought, you know what, if these personal development, self-help things can help for me, part of the impact that I want to have now that I kind of have a second chance on life is that I want to help other people with this as well.
Yeah,
I want to share with other people.
That's a powerful story.
Yeah, it was a tough one for a while. And, you know, I'm almost over it, but at the same time, I'm still kind of careful when we're at the beach.
Still processing it.
That's exactly right. But I'm past the point where I was for pretty much the first, I would say, 11 months afterwards.
Yeah, it's funny when you talk to anybody who has had like a life or death circumstance like that. It's funny how you hear them talk about things slow down, like theoretically slow down, because they're able to get real clear about one or two or three or four or five different things come almost all at one time.
That's right.
Is that about right?
That's right. And it's funny because at the time I didn't think there was going to be any benefit that came out of it. But now that I'm in the rare kind of, I guess, group of people that have been in a situation like that where you really think you're going to die and you're struggling literally and figuratively to stay above water.
Yeah.
It gives you perception on things, on life and on what you want to do, what you want to accomplish, and what you would think if you were in that position. Because a lot of times people were never in that position until it's at the end. And you hear people talking about things on their deathbed that they want to do or wish they would have done or who they wanted to spend more time with. But most people don't have that earlier on in their life like I did. So it does give you a perception on what's really important and how you want to impact the world.
What do you think the most difficult thing is for people who want to make a change in their life because they know they need to make a change in life? What's most difficult? What keeps people from actually changing their lives? What is at the core of that?
I think
you ever thought about that?
I have, and I personally think that there are three things, and I don't know if this is necessarily research based, but I think, and I keep going back to discipline, I think most people don't have the discipline to do it. I think if you really look at these things, a lot of it is not that difficult to understand, but the discipline to actually implement it and stay consistent with it is where people go wrong. I think it's also time. I think especially for a lot of parents that we are busier now than we ever have been before because kids are involved in so much and it's so frequent and it's all year long with most of the activities they participate in. And I think 100%. That and parents continuously pour into their kids. And I have nothing but the utmost respect for those people because I do the same thing. I pour into my kids constantly. I think that's one of the best ways to parent. But I think that if you continue to empty your cup and not fill your cup, and you continue to take care of everybody else in your life, but don't take care of yourself, it's almost been accepted and appreciated now in a way that I don't think people understand the detriment that it's paying though, because you can't burn the candle at both ends. It may be benefiting your kid now to a degree, but in 10, 15, 20, 30 years when they're taking care of you because you didn't take care of yourself right now, it's going to eventually catch up to you. So I think it's discipline. I think it's time. And I also think it's the ease. I think that the world and especially America and society everything has been designed to be so easy on us.
It's too easy just to exist anymore.
That's exactly right. And I even posted about this the other day. I said our ancestors and older generations, they used to have to fight large animals and kill large animals to eat, fight in world wars, and survive Great Depressions, but you can't get off the couch to take a walk for 45 minutes, or you can't cook a meal that has a few ingredients in it instead of ordering something that has like 30, 40, or 50 ingredients of it. You can't work out or wake up early or stay hydrated.
So why don't we do it? We know, you just articulated what we need to do. The average person needs to do these things, should do these things for a better quality of life.
Yeah.
But there's that disconnect.
There is a huge disconnect. The knowledge isn't all the way there, even though it's easy to access. It's not all the way there. Okay. I don't think most people have the knowledge that they need in terms of like, let's take nutrition and exercise, for example.
Okay.
Those are two of the biggest topics. You can find hours and days, weeks, months, years of information in terms of books, in terms of podcasts, in terms of
100%.
people all over the place in terms of exercise and nutrition. But people, I don't think they appreciate it as much. And I think one of the examples is if you go to your PCP, if you go to your doctor, right? When is the last time that you went to your doctor and they asked you about your nutrition or your exercise?
Never will.
Never. It very rarely exists. And that's nothing against the medical professionals, because I happen to really like my PCP and I like the previous one that I had too. But we're in a generation now where I feel like people are okay with the diagnosis and the script, but they're not okay with the prevention part of it.
100%.
And I think
There's
that
no money in that.
right. And they trust the doctor so much. I'm not saying you shouldn't trust your doctors, but they trust them so much that no matter what they say, and they rely on them is the thing. And I'm not saying prescriptions are always bad. There's times where they're needed and they're necessary, but why don't we try a few other things first? Or why don't we teach this first or implement this first before we always just go straight to that route? And I think that, I think of like my parents or whomever it may be, when a doctor says something, that's like gold to them, and they take that and they run with it. But why not? I don't know that there's a doctor, a medical professional in the world that would tell you that obviously they disagree on some things, and there's different medical philosophies on things. I don't think there's anyone that can argue that a good, healthy, nutritional plan and exercise are two of the most important things you can do. But when you go to the doctor, they very rarely, if ever, talk about it.
100%. And oftentimes, I believe, and this may be a little controversial, but I believe that's the case, Dan, because they themselves are not the epitome of health. They themselves may not be the fittest people. And again, would you buy, I don't know, would you buy investments from a stockbroker that doesn't have elements of the same investments in their portfolio? When you go to a PCP and he may be a world-renowned or a very well-respected PCP with, thousands of customers. But if he's 300 pounds and you see him chain smoking on the side of the building, I mean, is he the best one to give you nutritional and health advice? I don't know.
Right.
I'm not saying he can't. He obviously is. He's allowed to write prescriptions. But is it a good visual connection with his patients?
It's not.
He can't tell them to do the things he isn't willing to do himself.
That's right. It's almost like if you were to go to a strength trainer, like you're not going to take exercise advice from somebody who isn't implementing these things and showing these things and demonstrating these things and mastering these things themselves. But I think at a bare minimum, at least the dialogue should happen, and they should at least recommend you, even if they're not the experts in it, right? Like, there are people that are, though. There are people that study these things that can help. And I think it can not only just help that person, it can also help society as a whole. Because, I mean, we're at a point now where it's estimated that by 2030, so in 6.5 years, 50% of Americans are going to be considered obese. And the negative health implications because of that are huge. And that number is not going down, it's going up. And I think there's a lot of things that we can do to combat that, but I don't think that it's happening. And I wish that it was, which is another reason I'm getting into this, because I would love to see us to get into a healthier place.
So let's wade in there for a second. So the body positivity movement is a tough subject, because I think we both would agree that the last thing we want to ever do is hurt someone's feelings, especially go out of our way to hurt someone's feelings. And at the same time, you need to weigh that, I would assume, with the promotion of bad and unhealthy lifestyles. And, it's really a tough spot in today's society, because we don't want to, quote unquote, offend people or hurt people. But at the same time, I struggle when I see the female or male shape, it's typically female, that you see on a cover of a magazine at 270 to 350 pounds being celebrated in a way that looks glamorous or whatever. I mean, I definitely want people to feel good about life and themselves, but I'm not sure that that's the message, that body weight is the appropriate message to send out from a health perspective. It's a tough conversation to have.
It is, and I want people to feel good about themselves too, but you will feel better about yourself if you implement a good exercise regimen, and you also implement healthy nutrition habits. And that's research based.
It is. And we don't, in a broad sense, don't seem prepared to have those tough conversations.
I don't disagree with you. But I think that we need to get to a point where we are becoming so unhealthy, and it's not only having a negative impact on people's lives, but also if you think of the healthcare costs associated with unhealthy people, it's absolutely astonishing.
So what's the tipping point? Like, where's it going to be? Will there be a tipping point? Case in point, let's just take about something about like sizes of men's clothes. I'm noticing that, size in the 70s, it really is easy to see. In the 70s, if you take like the top 10 movie or TV stars, male, they're all at about a 31 to 32 inch waist, weigh $150 to maybe $170, maybe.
Right.
Today, take the same thing, right? Now, some of them will be very muscular. But just the body mass is so much bigger today.
It is. I think
it's nuts.
It is. It is crazy. I even look at sometimes like pro sports teams. Like think of the linemen in the 1930s, 100%. 40s, 50s compared to the linemen nowadays. Like the linemen back then, some of them weren't even big enough to be a linebacker nowadays.
Jack Lambert was a middle linebacker in the NFL.
Right.
Now look at him compared to, the current middle linebacker.
Right. Absolutely. Nowhere near the size and all those and those types of things. But I think that this doesn't go along directly with your question, but I think one of the biggest things is the ultra processed foods that we continuously eat. Like back then, I don't think it was as big, but it's continuously getting bigger and bigger.
The food's just shit.
It is, and they say now 60% of what the typical American eats is ultra processed foods, and the negative health implications of those ultra processed foods is huge. But it's easier, it's cheaper. And I think that a lot of times people turn to it because it's also faster, but it's not always. Most of the time, it's not better. If you look at foods, it's never. If you look at foods, it's in boxes or bags. The amount of ingredients on the back of it and how bad that is for you, compared to if you would get something that's 1, 2, 3 ingredients. I mean, it can make a world of a difference, but most people don't do it, and I don't know what it's going to take for us to get to that point.
Yeah, it's pretty scary. It's pretty scary that we are in denial. Like if you look at if you go to YouTube and you pull up videos or of old films of just people walking down the streets of New York City in the 40s, there's some really restored ones that are really interesting besides the point of topic here, but they're interesting to watch. But if you look at that, I just saw one week or two ago that was hundreds of people walking in New York City. Very well done. They were all rail thin, and occasionally you would see a portly man, and I was told that those are the folks that had money back then. Right? But everybody was, I would assume, healthier. Maybe not. Maybe they were smoking more then. Maybe the food was crappy then too. I just don't know. But we have changed. We have actually changed the normal body mass of humans. I mean, what is acceptable now?
That's right.
It's nuts.
It is. It's absolutely
by 50,
nuts.
60, 70 pounds, I think.
Right. And I don't know what I feel as if we got the message across more. And again, I think that if we had medical professionals more open to having the dialogue about it, then I think we would get to a different place. But I'm not sure that's going to happen. And I'm not sure it's going to happen very quickly either.
Money.
So it's up to me and you to do it based on this podcast.
Fucking fat. Let's get your shit together, people. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
It just it frustrates me because I was able to just make a decision and do it, and it sucks missing the foods you love, but it's a better life. And the argument, Dan, sometimes is that, well, people are comfortable in their own skin and da-da-da-da. And I say, okay, I'm glad they are. But if you gave someone the opportunity, case in point, if you had a 37-year-old woman here, I'm just throwing things out, who is 225 pounds, 5'6", so she's got some weight to her there, and seems like a very happy person. If you gave her the choice, though, of being 140 or 160 as opposed to 220, 230, they're going to take the lower weight. It isn't like people are so happy in their obese ways that they don't want to change. That is insanity. But I think there are people in this society that want you to believe that people are okay just the way they are.
Right.
I don't believe it.
I don't either. And I think it's the narrative that's being pushed. I think
don't believe it.
But I don't necessarily. I agree. I think that if you gave that person the choice, they would choose to be the 160.
And they shouldn't be discriminated against for any reason, let alone weight or anything. What I'm saying is, but don't sell me a line that they're just happy just the way they are, and they wouldn't want to change.
That's right.
I don't believe that for a second.
Even if it's, like, I use this as an example sometimes. If you went to your doctor and your doctor said to you, if I can give you something that's going to make you have a healthier body weight, a healthier brain, give you a better mood, better focus, better energy, better attention, better reaction time, better thinking, less stress, less anxiety, lower probability of getting dementia and type 2 diabetes and anxiety and Alzheimer's and depression, would you do that? Your answer is going to be yes all day. Of course. And those are all things that exercise can do.
No doubt.
But you don't hear a lot of people talking enough about not just the body benefits, but also the brain benefits that are associated with exercising.
Oh, it's the whole wellness of the entire physique. It's the brain. It's everything.
Everything.
And coupled with, winning the battle in the kitchen, if you could, those two are a superpower. If you can get your diet under control, what you eat, and couple that with the correct kind of exercise for your age and so forth. I mean, that's like a superpower.
It is. Those are the two of the biggest life hacks that if you couple those two things together,
no doubt,
that you can put yourself so far apart than everybody else. Not that you're trying to compete against them, but most people aren't doing that. And if you can put those two things, nutrition and exercise, together and do them consistently, the thing is you're not going to see any really results for a little bit of time. It's not going to be a day or a week. You have to stay consistent with it It takes dedication and time. And I think that sometimes people get frustrated with it. It's why a lot of times I don't even like to use the word diet, because I think it gets kind of misconstrued and used as like the flavor of the month. Like we're going to use, and I'm not going to name the ones, but the ones that are just full protein, or I'm going to go on this 800 calorie only diet. Well, how sustainable is that? It's not sustainable. It's a lifestyle change, and it's accepting the things.
It screams temporary.
It's temporary. And if you're temporary, then the likelihood of you either putting back on the exact amount of weight or gaining even more is way higher. But you have to make a lifestyle change. Learn about healthy nutrition, what you should be eating on a day-to-day basis for all of your meals, and timing and macronutrients and micronutrients, and then you can be way more successful.
It's interesting too, because it's like anything else, that once you get a little momentum and you start to see and feel a little different, it should build. It should become easier and kind of more exciting when you start to see those changes and so forth. And you're only, in that instance, only competing with yourself. I mean, the worst thing you're doing is looking at, this person weighs 125 and I want to be there and I want to look like that. Well, I guess you can find motivation in that for a short period of time, but ultimately you should be competing against who you were the day before.
That's right.
That's the long-term solution for success, right?
That's exactly right. It can't be you're competing against the person you see on Instagram, because it's not going to work that way. It's you competing against yourself, you setting a goal for yourself, and you realizing what you need to do and implementing the actions and habits to reach that goal. If you can get better every single day, that's the key, and it has to stay consistent over the long term. People, I think, they want to do it quickly, like a New Year's resolution, and they want to set this thing up.
Why don't they work? Why do resolutions?
It's funny because the whole month of January you're at the gym and you see all these new people, but then February comes around and half of them aren't there anymore, and it's because I think they take the foot off the gas and they don't see immediate results.
Because it's hard.
It is hard, but you know what though? Like, hard is good sometimes when you're talking about personal growth and health and development. And sometimes hard isn't the best. If you're getting a massage, if you're meditating and those kind of things, although meditation is hard, but you know what I mean? When you're pushing yourself in the gym, it should be hard. You should be breaking a sweat. You should be raising your heart rate. You should be having breathing deeper. But I think sometimes people don't push themselves as hard. And I know you and I were talking about David Goggins before, and it's actually an interesting thing from takeaway from his book, Can't Hurt Me.
Yeah, the first one
was he said that people on average give up after only putting forth 40% effort. So they leave 60% in the tank. So I'm thinking, if you go to do a workout at the gym, most people are only putting forth 40% effort. Imagine if we raise that to 50, 60, 70%, how much better results you would have and how much quicker. But instead, we take the easy way out too often, and we don't push ourselves as hard.
And what's interesting about that is if you start really competing against yourself or, what you did the day before and you build and build and build, that's a change of mentality to get there. And then that change of mentality can apply to other aspects of your life. It almost happens involuntarily.
It does. And it's almost like, here's where I am. I'm at point A. I want to get to point B.
Right.
But I have to realize, what does it take to get there? And understanding and accepting that there are sacrifices that are going to have to be made to get there. Like, you may have a busy day coming up at work the next day, but that doesn't mean it gives you an excuse to not work out at all. Okay, then wake up earlier in the morning, or go to bed later, or there's things you can do to adjust within your schedule. If you can't work out, find a way to get steps in.
Hold yourself accountable.
Take the steps instead of the elevator. Like, there's small things that you can do, as opposed to just grabbing onto those excuses that are.
Is it just a rut? Like, you think people get into this rut? Like, I know I should be doing this, but. And maybe I'll start next week sometime. But the next couple of days, I have things I have to do. I'm just going to just not think about it. Why do we continue with what we know is not good for us, or not putting us in a position to feel better or feel more comfortable or like to look in the mirror when we walk by? Like, why do we have those issues, and we know the way to fix them, but we just, on a broad scale, just don't do it?
I think I've said this recently.
It's unbelievable.
It's 4 E's. Ease and excuses are the enemy of extraordinary. I think that things have become so easy, and there's so many excuses that are out there that people are more willing to grab that excuse and apply that excuse to a certain situation.
It's almost currency, right?
It is. And
personal currency.
Yeah, and instead of them applying what they know they need to do, it's so much easier to come home after a long day and sit on the couch and stream Netflix and order food from an app and get it delivered to your door and take 10 steps to get there, eat it, and it's not healthy, and then moving on. But that's not what is always best, because people wouldn't realize, they're like, well, I don't have the energy to do it. Well, you want to have more energy? Then exercise, because that'll give you more energy. You want to sleep better? Exercise, because it'll give you better sleep. They don't realize that these things can kind of counteract what they're already suffering from.
For sure. Yeah. It frustrates me, because when I was able to, a couple of years ago, to shed a bunch of weight and just start feeling better about myself, naturally people see that. You get a lot of comments, positive and negative. I get it. But people will invariably ask you, hey, how'd you do it? And I was like, so gung-ho in the beginning, Dan, to tell them, I did this. And again, I'm not saying it'll work for you, but I'm very strict in what I do. It works for me, but it works. But when I saw people either rejecting it as either unhealthy, or I could never do that, or I can't give up my pasta, or I can't do this, or, or I can't quit drinking, or whatever, I get it. I'm not judging you. I don't really care what you do. But there was so much pushback that I can't do this, I can't do that. I just gave up. Like, I don't want to talk about it
That's
anymore.
right.
I mean, these are the things I did. They're on, I posted them on social. They worked for me. I'm not saying they work for you. I'm not a medical doctor, but it just seems like folks really want that quick, like the hack.
They want the red
hack
pill
for everything.
that doesn't exist.
There isn't one.
And I tell people there's no magic pill you're going to take.
They're taking insulin now to lose weight.
Right.
Are you fucking kidding me?
Right. You know what to do. Well, you know the natural way to do it, but everyone wants the easy and the quick way out.
Dan, I lost the weight and got my shit together because I didn't want to end up like my father and taking insulin.
That's right.
That's why I lost the weight. Now they're taking insulin to lose the weight.
That's right.
I mean, this world is insane.
I think it's part of like your tribe and your people and what's accepted too. Like, this reminds me of, did you ever hear of the blue zones?
Enlighten me.
There's a very interesting story. It's called the Blue Zones, and Dan Buettner worked for National Geographic. And he was doing a study on the world's centenarians. So groups of people that live to be 100 years old
Right on.
and live to be healthy 100 years old, not just existing, but a healthy 100 years old or older, right? And the reason why they called it the blue zones is because when scientists circled the areas on the map where these existed, they did it in blue, so they called them the blue zones.
Okay.
And the 5 areas of the world that these existed was Okinawa, Japan. There's a place in Greece, a place in Italy, a place in Costa Rica, and Loma Linda, California.
Oh, right on.
And he started to kind of do a study on what are the common themes amongst these people that's allowing them to live so long, but also live so long and to be so healthy. And some of the biggest takeaways, if you read into it, and he has a book on it that I've purchased before, I've watched some videos on it, is first of all, their diet, what they eat. Right? Their nutrition that they get is all a lot cleaner than the ultra processed foods that we get. So it's diet. They all have some sort of movement or exercise. I'm not saying they're going to the gym, but some of them might be farmers where they're walking up on cliffs and walking 5 miles a day or whatever it might have been. They're constantly moving around. They have a purpose in life. They have something that drives them and makes them want to continue to go on and to go on healthy. And they all have very close relationships as well. And it's like who they surround themselves with and having a community of people. Now, there's some other variables that come into play as well, but those are kind of the biggest things that were to take away from that. And it almost makes me think of like, that's what's expected there. That's what is appreciated there. And that's what's causing these people to be healthy. Like, for example, in Japan, you ever heard like the 80% rule where a lot of times people in Japan only eat until they're 80% full.
Right.
Whereas if you are in America,
there's no discipline like that.
There's not like that. If you have food in front of you, people are eating it. Like if you talk to a relative that's a little bit older than you and they go to a graduation party, the first thing they talk about is what kind of food they have there. Like, well, they had hot sausage and potatoes. Like, I don't care what kind of food they had there like that. But that's what people like value a lot here. Whereas in other places, it's not as kind of valued the way that we do it now in almost an inappropriate and unhealthy way.
And I know people that they call themselves foodies and so forth. And I know some that are in tremendous shape. And I know some foodies that are gluttons, so I've seen the whole, so I'm not saying because you're a person that enjoys food, you have a problem. Not at all, because there's a lot of healthy foodies. I just don't know where something changed in Americana in the last 50 years or 60 or 70 years, where it seems like something switched where food was primarily a necessity, and then it became not a luxury. It became like did we make it too much part of our social life? Did we make it too much part of our, was it, when you hear the term comfort food, I want to just like cringe.
Right. I'm not a huge fan of that myself. No, I know. Yeah. And I think a lot of things that played into it are even misinformation. Like, you remember for a long time there when they said eggs were very unhealthy for you and you're going to get high cholesterol.
Decades.
You shouldn't eat them for decades. That's what was sold to people, and that's what their knowledge was. So they kind of, okay, I'm not going to have an egg. I'll have bagels and cereal and donuts and all these other unhealthy things because they weren't being told.
Blood sugar.
That's exactly right. We're not going to tell us that those things are unhealthy, but in
they
reality,
don't hurt the heart.
Oh
right?
no, not at all, not at all. But now the research is pretty clear that eggs are one of the healthier foods that you can eat. Now I understand it has to be there's a debate on grass fed and the chickens and all this stuff. That's not my point. My point is eggs had a bad rap for decades, but they're one of the healthier things you can actually eat. So I think it's misinformation. And I also think a huge part of it is marketing, advertising, packaging, and palatability. Like, I think that the food companies are absolute experts at where they put the food in the grocery stores, how they label things, how they package things, what's accepted 100%. In America, even like the ingredients that are allowed in American foods. And if you would like look at compared to like UK, it's completely different. We allow so much more into our foods, but it's not healthy for us. So I encourage people pretty often that if you go to a grocery store, if you stick to the outside aisles, if you think about it, that's where they keep most of the healthy proteins.
Absolutely.
The fruits, the vegetables, what's fresh. If you go into the inside aisles, that's where the boxes and the bags are, where the things that have 30, 40, 50 ingredients in them. And those are the things that are unhealthy for you. But a lot of times people go there and certain things are placed certain places to maximize profits for the companies. Yeah. But if you stick around those outside aisles, you'll do yourself a major favor.
100%. And what drives me crazy more than anything else is, my life changed when I read that book, The Wheat Belly, back like, I don't know how long ago that was, but understanding how detrimental processed wheat is, processed carbohydrates are to our body, and understanding that and how flawed the strategy was, especially the vegan lifestyle, which, be who you are. But the vegan mantra from like decades ago was, well, the egg is bad, but it's okay if you have a couple bagels. Right. That's not going to hurt you.
No, not at
those 150 carbohydrates in those two bagels, you're better off having that.
That's right.
Than having the 0 carb egg.
Right.
With the protein.
That has protein and vitamin A and vitamin B and vitamin D and E and
it's
choline.
So insane.
It is.
It's so insane.
The fact that it's accepted and it's insane. It's a great word.
I hope we're moving away from that to some degree.
I hope so too. I just think that people have to be willing to do, like, I think that it goes back to that effort and it goes back to that discipline. Like, you can set yourself up. If you have more time on the weekend, then do some meal prepping, right? Yeah. Like, start with that good, healthy protein, 100%. Make your snacks and the carbohydrate side, but make it a healthy carbohydrate side.
Dan, you're so right. But that's basically what you're describing, basically, is taking the enjoyment out of food for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Right? The spontaneity of, what am I going to eat today?
Yeah, right. Well, you know what, though? You don't have to do it all the time. I just think that you have to do it and eat clean the high majority of the time. It doesn't mean every once in a while you can't enjoy yourself, or if you're going out to dinner with somebody, have a piece of cake. I'm not saying that you have to completely shut off, because I think sometimes when people go that route, then they kind of revert back because they miss those things so bad. So I just think you have to eat healthy the majority of the time.
For me, the cleaner I started to eat, and the more regimented I didn't want the cheat days. Like, I laugh when people say cheat days. I don't cheat on shit. That's not good for me.
Yesterday,
97% of the time, I will not touch that.
Right. If it wasn't good yesterday, it's not going to be good today.
Yeah, I don't, and I get it. It's almost like what are your thoughts on cheat meals and so forth? Like, to me, it's a mental trickery the way it's outlined, as far as I understand it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not completely against them. I'm more of if you have to gain all the knowledge of the right foods that you should eat. Like, for example, like there are brain foods that I think are incredibly helpful. Right? Like, things that you eat that aren't just healthy for your body, but they're also healthy for your brains in a variety of capacities that I think that people should implement. Like, and I came up with an acronym. It's doable fun. So D is dark chocolate,
right on.
Olive oil, avocados, berries, leafy greens, eggs. F is fish. U is what makes you feel good. And then N is nuts. And I think you need to incorporate those types of foods, not all of them every single day, but you need to get 3 or 4 of them into you every single day if you can. For sure. And I also think the meal prep things and planning in advance what you're going to have. And I know you said before about the spontaneity. I think that can exist. And I think that a cheat meal can exist to a degree. But if you're someone who has the discipline that doesn't need it, then on.
I don't want it, though, because once I started to eat clean, I realized how good I felt.
Right. I don't really do it either. Like, I personally don't, because I'm more of the, like, I'm all on board and I'm not going to have an entire cheat meal. Will I have like a snack with my kids once in a while? Yeah, absolutely. But I don't do like the whole meal myself either. But I know some people do it, and it works for them.
Does it?
The Rock does it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think he's an outlier.
I think he might be an outlier too.
But I think what it does is it is another proof that we're just so we're so beaten up by our easy lifestyles. We have to have a cheat meal. Like, there was a woman that told me, and I'm not kidding you, man. She was like, I really have to do something with my health, Eric. I saw you lose that weight. We knew each other personally. Very nice person. And she was just going on and on. I said, I really don't like sharing my stuff because it never seems to be received well. But this is what I do. I lay it out for her. She goes, well, first thing out of her mouth, Dan. First fucking thing out of her mouth. I'm quoting her verbatim. Well, I just can't give. I just can't give up my Mancini's bread. I won't. And I'm like, I didn't even mention Mancini's bread, but I said I don't eat enriched white flour fake products, right? And that's the first thing her mind went to. It's like there's such a pull.
There is
on our. It's almost like we have a religious connection.
I know,
to the foods we love.
Right.
What the fuck is wrong with us?
She's like, I can't give up the bread. Well, you can. Actually,
Mancini's is. She was very specific about it.
I understand Mancini's is good, but I mean, I went gluten-free a few years ago because my son had to, and I thought, you know what, if he's going to do it, I'm going to do it with him. Yeah. So I did it, and I just started to feel so much better overall. So to me, I don't miss it at all anymore either. And it's not like someone's like, how, isn't it hard for you if you want to eat pasta or pizza? Well, first of all, they make gluten-free pasta and pizza that's just as good. But secondly, I don't eat those things a ton of times anyways, and I feel better about it. So that lady, yes, you can give up the bread. But
that's the point. Like, it's if something makes you feel better, what price would you pay for that? And for me, it was just giving up all the shit that I was eating for so long because, I've been 260. I'm 172 as of today.
Wow, good for you.
I like life at 172.
It's a lot better. You feel better.
Life is better at 172.
Sleeping better.
A million
almost
reasons.
Everything's better.
A million reasons.
I've talked about this one.
It's crazy.
It is. There was a story. I told this before where I heard the story before. There was a lady who all her life she struggled with her weight and she couldn't lose weight, right? But she found out that her daughter needed a kidney transplant and that she was a match. So she could have been a donor for her. So she went to her doctor, and her doctor said, the only way that I will do this surgery on you is if you lose 100 pounds. But guess what she did? She found a way to lose 100 pounds because she had a purpose and a reason, a desire to do so. Right. And she lost 100 pounds, saved her daughter's life, and went on. But the people like the lady you talked about before, how badly do you want it? Because if you want to lose it, not a lot. Because if you can't lose that Mancini's bread, and I get it's really, really good, then you don't want it enough to be able to actually do what it takes to get there. And I think that's not even just with diets and nutrition. I think it's with a lot of things in life. Like if you want something badly enough, are you willing to do what it takes to get there? And I think that a lot of times we don't, and we take the easy way out.
I think you're absolutely right. And again, those are very personal decisions. So what works for me or if that's valued by me might not be valued by you. I get it. I mean, there's no one size fits all there. No pun intended.
Right.
But I really struggle at times trying to, because I am probably the most average guy that's ever walked the planet. And I mean that sincerely. I've been very lucky in things I've worked out for me. I've been very lucky. I failed out of flung college and a whole bit. I'm just saying anything that I've tried, the things that did work out, I'm very confident that everybody can do it. I mean, it isn't rocket science.
You lost 88 pounds, is that right?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I think I was 242 when I looked in the mirror at the start of the pandemic, and then I couldn't take it anymore. So within 8 months, I was 170. I broke the 180, and then I found, I went down to 165, didn't like myself there. I kind of figured my body does good at 170, 172, and that's where I've stayed. And it's not, I have 5 collective kids with Natalie between our blended family. There's plenty of crap brought into my house that stocks the shelves there. Yep. I can assure you, from pies and all the terrible cereals and whole milk. There's all kinds of stuff. They're just not part of my lifestyle because they don't make me feel like I feel when I'm regimented with what I choose to eat. Eating is not a event for me. It's just to survive.
That's me too. And so my wife actually mentions that sometimes because I'll eat something even though I may not love the taste, but I know the macronutrients and micronutrients that I'm getting from it. And I realize the impact it's going to have on my body. Yeah. And actually, I've just been a lot of stuff recently negatively about kale.
Yeah,
but no.
Good. Can I quit that now?
Yeah, no, just do the spinach. But and she'll say that a lot. And I'm like, you know what? It's just because my life doesn't revolve around food in that way. Like it doesn't in a way because I'm very, strict about what I eat and what I put into my body. But it doesn't revolve around it in a way that I'm like, okay, I have to have this, or I have to have this cake, or I have to have this cheat meal, or I have to have these donuts or pancakes. Like, I walk by those things constantly, and I don't even do a second glance because
anybody can do that,
right?
I believe that.
I do too.
Because I was thinking to myself, man, I figured this out. This is not hard. But the pushback they would ask you, and then you'd share some things with them. but the pushback is just they just don't want to make the change. And so then I start reflecting on why is that? Like, why are we so at the point where it's almost like alcohol, tobacco? Like, hopefully we're forcing tobacco out of society. I hope that's happening. But alcohol and all your high caloric foods and all that, it's almost like, I don't want to say drug, but it's almost like their currency in some way. They're valued in society.
I'm rewarding myself by doing X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to get this. Part of that, I think, though, too, is your associations, your relationships. Because if you and I left this studio right now and we grabbed some other people that had a similar mindset as that, we went to a restaurant, I think that all of us would probably pick a healthier meal.
Correct.
Whereas if you and I met the lady you were talking about, the Mancini's bread, and the other person was, and those people went and hung out with each other, they're going to do the same thing. So I think part of it is who you associate yourself with and who you have relationships with. They're either healthy or unhealthy. Like, if you hang around with two smokers, you're going to probably be the third. Right. If you hang around with two people that go to the gym, you'll probably be the third. So I think part of it is also who you surround yourself with, and those things wear off.
Right?
That's your five. That's
matters.
That's it. You're five.
I mean, you're either part of what did Jim Rohn used to say? You're either part of a something group or another group, and he had labels for both of them. But do you remember being a young person hearing that, Dan? I was like, wow, having a growth mentality, or whatever the other one was.
Yeah, and it's almost like, I think it called like emotional contagion or association contagion. It's like you take on the actions and habits of the five people you're closest with.
And Rohn used to also add, never join an easy group. Always be the dumbest in the room and take glee with that.
That's right. And John Maxwell recently, I read something from him recently, said if you're the smartest one in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Yeah, and I believe that to be true.
I do too, because you have to always push yourself.
I'm always the dumbest one in the room. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that, man.
Yeah.
Every time I sit down in this conversation, like I am tonight, I'm the dumber one in the room.
No, I don't know. We can argue that.
I don't know about that.
So yeah, like you have a unique perspective because you changed your nutrition and you felt the impact that it had on your body and on your brain, right? And a lot of people don't have that perspective.
Well, I did it quick, I think, because I was willing to combine a vigorous amount of exercising, very, very, very vigorous walking, trail walking with some weight, with this carb restrictive, caloric restrictive diet, really paying attention to everything, examining everything I was eating, and eliminating booze at the same time. So it's kind of like this whole metamorphosis, and it happened. The reason why it happened fast and shocked people because I did all those things at once, which is nothing special. Anybody can do that.
It's still a lot at one time.
But it worked for me, yeah. And once I got a taste of it, Dan, I just wanted more, man.
And you felt better, right?
I feel a million times better today than I did at the start of the pandemic.
Right.
A million times better.
So I have an interesting story that happened to me too. So I've always been into like nutrition and food. I mean, I didn't really know as much, then in college and high school than I do now, right? I mean, I'm a certified nutrition coach through the National Academy of Sports Medicine. So like something that I study a lot, look into a lot, read a lot about, and try to implement myself too. But when I really started to get a really strong appreciation for food was actually in college. So I played baseball in college, and one summer I was playing in a summer collegiate baseball league with guys from all over the country. And where we were playing and the team that we were playing on was sponsored by a fast food powerhouse. I'm not going to mention it right now. I'm not sure how a business attorney would feel about that one, but I'm not going to mention who it was. But if I gave you 3 guesses, you would probably get it.
I probably can guess.
You probably can guess it. So we got 3 free meals per day per player. And from guys living all over the country, I mean, we had guys from California and Texas and Florida, wherever, playing on this team. And some guys had jobs, but they were, off and on because we're traveling a lot, we're playing a lot, we're practicing a lot. So people weren't making a lot of money from those jobs at that time. So when we heard that we get 3 free meals per day per player, we were through the roof. No grocery shopping, no cooking, no food prep. We don't have to worry about meal preps or anything like that. It was great news for us. And I'm not a huge fast food person anyways, but at that time, it was almost like a necessity because of how busy we were and we're living, out of state and all those types of things. But I remember after about day 7 or 8 of eating at that place, probably at least twice per day, that I felt terrible. Like I was sluggish. I was tired. I wasn't performing as well. My focus was off. My body just felt beat down. And
I had a shit ton of inflammation.
Tons of inflammation. That's one of the biggest issues, I think, with the standard American diet is the inflammation. But at 21 years old, that's when I really understood how big of an impact what you eat has on your physical health, but also on your mental health as well.
Yeah, that'll do it to you. I mean, just take one characteristic of the American diet. Just take sodium.
Mm-hmm.
Just the average American's daily intake of sodium is frightening.
And here's the thing though too, like in some capacities, sodium is actually good.
You need it.
So you need it, you know,
for sure.
You need it. It's electrolyte and
low blood sugar or low blood pressure if you have too little, right?
And in the morning, like I actually, like every morning when I get up, besides the gratitude practice, I drink water instantly. And a lot of times I put salt in it, right, to replenish.
So do I.
But I also think that, you know, I read recently that, again, 60% of what we eat is ultra-processed food. But I also read, and I'd have to check the data on this, but the average American eats a pound of flour and sugar per day. And I think that you couple the ultra-processed food, the bad seed oils, the tons of refined carbohydrates, all this extra sugar, and I think that is a recipe for disaster. And I think it's what we're seeing right now. That's why they called standard American diet SAD, S-A-D, is because it really is sad.
Yeah, it's had. I will say it's that dangerous combination of bad fats and sugar mixed together is like the death knell.
Really bad. Yeah,
it's like it's. I mean, because the right fats, especially if you're using them, you know, if you really go through a period of low carbohydrates and you use that as energy, I mean, it can be done effectively. But man, when you combine high sugars and bad fats together, it's just it's a diet nightmare.
It is, and like especially the trans fats, which is what you'll see in a lot of like the baked goods and a lot of the things that you buy in the grocery stores that are in the bags and the boxes. And saturated fats, to a degree, are needed. I mean, I think we eat them in excess. But if you're talking about the fats that you want to have, you want to get monounsaturated fats. And I think some of the best sources of those are the olive oil and the avocados and some seeds and some nuts I recommend that people eat because it is very healthy fats.
Almonds are good for you.
Yeah, and they say that, you know, I think fats get a bad name. They get a bad rap, but monounsaturated fats are good for you in the right amounts, right?
Sure.
I mean, if you look at, you know, carbohydrates compared to protein compared to fats, like 1 gram of carbohydrates has 4 calories, 1 gram of protein has 4 calories, but 1 gram of fat has 9 calories. But it doesn't mean you should eliminate it completely because monounsaturated fats can actually be very good, especially for brain health.
Correct. Yeah, and I think that we also, I always read, and correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, please tell me. But if you are thoroughly watching your carbohydrates and you're even doing some carbohydrate restriction, you know, saturated fat is a tremendous energy source as long as it's not abused.
Yeah, I don't know as much about that, and especially like with keto diets and stuff. I've never really dabbled into that before, so I couldn't answer that.
Yeah, well, I always thought I was going to do that, but then I realized in the end it's a mathematical equation. It's calories, and really, you know, calories in. What are you burning for the day?
That's right.
I mean, that's kind of like pretty much everything.
Right. And I mean, so that's the thing about calories. I think that, you know, people have a misconception about calories because, you know, to lose weight, you have to be in a caloric deficit. There's no arguing that you have to be in a caloric deficit.
Correct.
But I think people think that, you know, if I eat 2,000 calories a day, and I go to the gym and I'm looking at the treadmill and I only burn 300 calories while I'm exercising, how am I going to make up for this? But they don't realize that you're burning calories all the time. Yes. You're burning calories when you sleep. There's something called TDEE, total daily energy expenditure. It's basically the amount of calories that you burn per day, but there's a lot of things that go into that. Your resting metabolic rate, the thermic effect of food. There's the actual non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which is walking around. You and I are burning calories when I talk with my hands a lot, so I'm burning calories talking with my hands. So there's a lot that goes into it, but at the end of the day, it is calories in, calories burned. But it's not just through exercising; it's through a variety 100%. Of other sources as well. But 100%. I encourage people that, you know, if you're talking about the food, start with the lean protein source and work around that, because protein, it has satiety, which gives you that feeling of being full. But then it also, you build around that with what you're going to select differently. But I think a lot of times it's the opposite. People start with the carbohydrates and the fat. And I'm not saying you shouldn't have those, because you should, but I think they start in the wrong place. Like, start with the lean meat or the eggs or the Greek yogurt or whatever it might be.
I think for sure, because like you just said, fats and carbohydrates are what they don't provide satiety.
They don't promote it as much as the protein
does.
Right.
Correct. And the protein can, you don't have that constant feeling that you need to keep eating.
That's right. So
in layman's terms.
Yes. No. So incorporate more protein, and you should feel full more, which then will offset you eating other things that you probably shouldn't be eating. Not only that, protein is a building block to everything in your body, pretty much. So muscle, yes, people think of protein, they think of protein powder and bodybuilders, but pretty much everything in your body is also created, for the most part,
your brain,
from protein, right?
100%. Okay, talk to me a little bit about this, your podcast.
Yeah, so my podcast, it's called the Optimal You Podcast, and it's a U, like the letter U. And, my whole goal behind it is to do health, wellness, and personal development, tips and strategies and information for people. Sometimes it's just me giving information. Sometimes it's me having a guest on there that's a subject matter expert on something. And the whole goal behind it is to have people listen in and to feel like they have somewhere to go to get knowledge such as this. Things on, my 4 pillars of my program is TEAM, TEAM. And T is thinking and mindset. E is eating and nutrition. A is actions and habits for success. And M is movement and exercise. So most of the things, and to me, those are the 4 building blocks of most of the things you can do in life if you want to be successful. If you incorporate those 4 things, I feel like you can put yourself on a trajectory for success. So most of my topics fit into one of those pillars. And again, sometimes it's me and sometimes it's guests, but it's something that I just started recently, probably back in, I would say, March or April. And I'm going to keep rolling with it, and I'm getting good feedback on it, and just want to help people out and help people listen in.
I think it's well done. But who gave the idea to do it? Where'd you come up with it?
That was me. Yeah. So I was just, after I had that whole experience that I was talking about at the beach, I started to do a lot of different personal development things. And I thought, one of the ways that I can get out there to a lot of different people is to do the podcast, because they can listen in on a variety of different platforms. If someone's in the car driving and they're in traffic, or if they go to the gym, it's usually shorter pieces of information that they can just kind of take in to help themselves out.
Sure. And talk to me about your consulting business.
Yeah, so my consulting business, if people want to follow me, they can go on my Instagram page is where I'm most active, and it's Dr. Dan O'Rourke. And again, my doctor is I'm not a medical doctor, but it's in education. I have a doctorate in leadership and administration, but my Instagram page is Dr.Dan O'Rourke. It's DANOROURKE. And in the consulting business is DanO'RourkeConsulting.com. And essentially what it is people can come in and, we can talk about all this knowledge. We can talk about all this information, but a lot of what you and I have talked about is people actually implementing it.
Correct.
And being accountable for it, and having someone to go to for support and asking questions. And that's where I can come into play. So the consulting business is helping people in terms of health, wellness, self-care, personal development. It could be individuals, it could be small businesses, it could be larger businesses, it could be a small team of people. They come in and I can do one-on-one or small group coaching, give them the information that they need, give them the action steps to carry these things out to be successful, and then offer them the support along the way. Because one of the things about me and when I coached is I want people to be successful. Like, I want to be successful myself, but I also want other people to be successful too. So if you come onto my team and join my team and get on my tribe, I'm going to work with you to help to put you on a path so you can be successful as well.
Yeah. So often, we have all these intentions on things we want to do, and we kind of know what we kind of should be doing or how to get started. But, most humans, me included, if there's not a system in place, we're not going to do as well. Oftentimes we'll just burn ourselves out and quit.
That's right. That's right. And I think a lot of times that, you look at any, John Maxwell's this quote, everything rises and falls on leadership. And if you look at any successful sports organization, they have head coaches. And if those coaches don't perform, they get rid of them and get a new coach.
Correct.
And even in like an NFL football team, they have coaches for every position because coaching is so important because they help to give you the knowledge, but also hold you accountable, show you how to implement it, and then provide you support along the way too. So if you're someone new to health, wellness, and personal development, I honestly think that one of the greatest investments is the one you make into yourself. So if you invest into a coach or a consultant that can help you, then I feel like you're going to carry that on with you no matter where you go. Because, you know, you might go and buy a car or spend money on a purse or whatever else it may be, but you should invest in yourself. And I think that that's how someone like me comes into play where, you know, I've been fortunate to be able to gain this information, to gain this knowledge, and to have these coaching strategies to help people out. So I feel as if you would invest in yourself by maybe getting a coach that can help you along the way. I don't think you're going to regret it.
Well, I think the one beautiful thing about the modern era is that we understand that a certain portion of our society, I'm going to say a lot of them, will always do better either in a group environment or with specific coaching. And that's not just limited to athletics anymore. And I think that that's what's great about our modern society is that we can be specialized and get direct one-on-one help now. I think all of us could use it.
I agree. I think that's actually proven that you're more likely to succeed if you have a group of people around you that have the same visions and goals and aspirations and wants and desires. And if you work together as a team, and if you have someone leading you along the way, you're way more likely to actually achieve that.
And plus, you're also putting systems in place which is going to hold people accountable to themselves.
That's right. That's right. James Clear said before that you don't rise to the level.
Atomic Habits, right?
It was Atomic Habits. It's a great book. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. So whatever systems you have in place is going to determine what you do.
Oh, that's so true.
I mean, I could have 1,000 goals right now in my mind, and I want to do this, and I want to accomplish X, Y, and Z. And those are great goals, okay. But what systems do you have in place that are actually going to set you up for success to achieve those goals? That's what's important.
Yeah, 100%. When you look today, because you're active on social media, and I mean, social media to me is an enigma, and I'm considerably older than you, so I mean, I can actually look at it from the old fuddy-duddy. But I understand. I kind of used it quite a bit in my prior business. And I know how to use it, but when you look at it today, where do you think for young people looking to either start a business or a young person maybe looking for inspiration to lose weight or to get better, get their diet, to get their nutrition under control, where do you see social media being beneficial and where do you see social media being absolutely terrible?
I think
the two ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, I've heard a good quote.
Are they the same?
It's never take advice from somebody you wouldn't trade places with. So I think that if you're going to take advice from somebody, if you're going to follow somebody, do you really know what kind of character they have? Do you really know, were they able to achieve anything? Were they truly successful themselves? Or is this all a show? And the funny part is I'm actually not a huge fan of social media, and I actually wasn't on it for the longest time. Like, I'm probably one of the only people my age that doesn't have Facebook. I actually started Instagram. I know. I actually started the Instagram page just for a way to kind of, discuss my message and to talk to people about what I do. So I think that the biggest takeaway is that you have to make sure that the people that you're following are actually people that have achieved something in their life, because there's a rabbit hole that you can go down, and there's a lot of negatives that come along with social media as well. So I think it's making sure that it's a trusted source that actually has achieved something. Yeah,
I think there's unfortunately too much tied to money as well too.
I agree.
It may not look like it is, but ultimately if you dig a little bit, you'll see that it's kind of a sales job.
They're doing it for a reason, and a lot of them are making money off of it.
Yeah, for sure. And again, it's another great lesson for a young person to learn that you are ultimately responsible for the decisions you make or the people that you aspire to be, or you think are influential, or the people that you want to be interested in. You need to take ownership of your life and make sure that you are doing what's best for you.
That's a great
way to put it. No one's coming to do it for you.
Not coming to rescue, not coming to save you. You got to do it yourself, and you're responsible.
Ownership needs to be taken there.
100%.
And I think oftentimes we set young people off into this chasm of social media and expect them to know how to effectively maneuver it at a young age. And I think a lot of kids are failing.
Well, there's an age limit on a lot of the social media platforms too that aren't always followed. Like, and parents sometimes for one reason or another allow them to be on there. And I'm not here to tell anyone how to parent and if that's right, wrong, or indifferent.
Right.
But I mean, I can say that even, some of them might be 13 years old. That's the age restriction. But I know 23 and 33-year-olds that can't handle being on social media and handling it appropriately and doing the correct things 100%. On there. So 100%. I mean, when I use it, which is strictly really, well, every once in a while I share other things with the family and stuff like that. But for the most part, it's more about, my podcast or my message or the consulting stuff or just valuable content that I want to get out there.
Yeah. For sure. It's a delivery method.
It is. I'm delivering information to people, and I can't do that by writing letters or sending smoke signals. I can put it on there, and then I'm delivering what I think to be good content for people to be able to help them grow.
You think it's making us complacent? When it comes to our nutrition, maybe, or, our body image or, our weight management? I
think it can. One of the things I actually tell people is, like, when you wake up in the morning, don't touch your phone for the first 30 minutes of the day. Mm-hmm. Because if you do that, then you get yourself in that rabbit hole of negative news stories, of stressful emails, of comparing yourself to somebody else on social media. It's usually not a positive reason that you're going on there. So I think that if instead you would take 30 minutes in the morning to do other things that are going to benefit you, then I think you can kind of avoid that social media rabbit hole that you can get into that's going to be counterproductive because you're taking time that you could be doing stuff otherwise.
Oh, for sure. Anyway, then again, that just comes down to appropriately managing and how many young folks, it affects us all, but especially young folks, were thrown in that chasm of social media without really any instruction manual.
That's right. Now, I think a lot of times that there can be education and appropriate information that's shared with the kids. I'm not sure how far it's always going to go, but with some of them, it has to be an education part of it as well.
Yeah, managing it. And I look at it now, it's so much, is it more difficult than prior generations? I kind of think it is. There's more on their plate that they have to deal with.
They have access to more information than anyone has in prior generations. There's no doubt about it. And they can see everything. And in some ways, that's where kind of like the body image thing comes in, because you're seeing this person that's from across the country that looks this way at your age, and you think that you should do that and have access to some correct and some incorrect news stories. And I do think it's definitely a huge challenge this generation of kids is going to have to face, and is facing right now.
Did you have a good time?
I had a great time.
We have to do this again.
I'm in. Let's do it. You call me up and let me know.
We do a Four Friends show here where we get not like-minded people, but people from different backgrounds. We blend them together and we just go at it and have a lot of fun.
Let's do it.
I think you'd be amazing on that. And we do have some shows that are intently about nutrition, self-development, and so forth. But I can see, if you're willing, I can see you having being one hell of a contributor there.
I'm in. Call me up. I love it. I had a lot of fun.
Well, buddy, thank you for doing this. And again, how can they reach you?
Yeah, thanks you. So I'm on my podcast is the Optimal You podcast.
Excellent, by the way.
Thank you very much.
Content.
It's you with a U. You can follow me on Instagram at dr.danO'Rourke, and then my webpage is dana'rourkeconsulting.com.
And I think on your web site, you also offer a first consultation. It doesn't cost anything at all.
It's free 30-minute discovery call, so someone can just go in, book on my Calendly, and they can have a free 30-minute informational session with me. I'll kind of go over the program, cool. And then they can give me what their goals are. We could talk it through. If I can help you, great. If we can connect, that's great. And if not, that's okay. But it's a free 30-minute call.
Everybody likes free, right?
Absolutely, they do.
Dan, I appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me on.
All right, friends, we are out.
Thank you.